All right, folks, if you came for help on the Succession Online Interactive, came to the right spot. All right, Ecological Succession. Remember, put your names here. 3 names max. If you have 4, go 2 and 2. So don't give me like 5, 6 names up here. There's not enough work for 4 or 5 people. All right, anyways, define what is ecological succession. Let's see. How do I word it? All right, so it is the replacement of organisms in an ecosystem as it matures. So, well, let's get in. You'll kind of understand it more as we go. So there's 2 types. There's primary and secondary succession. Primary succession is the replacement of organisms in an ecosystem that has never had life on it before. So an example of this would be like the Hawaiian Islands out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. They're volcanoes. So those islands just emerged from underneath the ocean, boom, came up out of the ocean and made brand new land, with lava. Well, obviously there's nothing living there because nothing can live on molten lava, but eventually it cools, hardens into rock, and then some life starts to show up there. But obviously it's not going to be any kind of animals because animals can't eat rocks. I mean, they can, but you're not getting any nutrition from a rock. So the first things that show up there are like things like moss and these other organisms like lichen, obviously autotrophs. And then once those start to die and they start breaking up the rock and it starts turning into more like, like gravel and then like dirt. Well, when those organisms die, they make soil. They put nitrogen and phosphorus into the soil, and that's what makes soil. So now plants can grow there, but you got to have soil before plants can grow there. Okay, this wasn't a question. Oh, wait, yeah, I guess it is. Click on grasses and add grasses to my island. Why can't grasses survive on the island yet? Because soil, quote unquote, soil hasn't been created yet. Things have to live there and then die. And then it puts those nutrients into the ground, and that becomes soil. And now plants can live there, like grasses, and then eventually bushes and trees. Click add lichens to my island. Lichen is a combination of moss and another organism that combine together, and they don't need soil to live. They can live directly on rocks. All right, so what is a pioneer species? Pioneer species are the first organisms to inhabit a new ecosystem. In primary succession, it's usually always things like lichen, because they don't need soil. It's got to be something that does not need soil, can live directly on like rock. 5, what role do lichens play in primary succession? They help to produce soil when they die. They put nutrients into the ground. When they die, they put nutrients in the ground, and then plants can start to live there. Click primary consumers and add primary consumers to my island. Why can't primary consumers survive on the island yet? Because they need plants they need plants to eat. So just with lichen, that's not enough. There's not enough food for the primary consumers to eat yet. So you got to have things like at least plants, grasses, before the primary consumers can move in. This is just a statement. Add mosses and then grasses to your island. What happens to the mosses as the grasses begin to grow? So it went from lichen. First it was just barren rock, and then lichen moved in, which is like it's like algae and mosses put together. And then mosses came. They were second. And then grasses began to grow. Well, what happened when the grasses began to grow? The grasses began to take over, and the mosses started to decrease. Because the grass, they started to outcompete the moss because they grow faster and they grow taller. So they started getting more of the nutrients, getting more of the sunlight. So the grasses started to take over and mosses started to go away. 9, can primary consumers now survive on your island? Yes, because they now have enough food to eat. So remember, primary consumers, those are things that eat plants, herbivores, things like rabbits, mice, things like that. Click on flowers and add flowers to my island. What type of animals do flowers need to continue to grow? They need bees, because the bees help to pollinate the flowers. All right, so without bees that carry the pollen from one plant to the next, plants can't reproduce as fast without bees. So bees are very beneficial. Add bushes to your island. Add secondary consumers to your island. What is the niche of secondary consumers? The niche. What is their job? What's their role? They eat the primary consumers. They limit the size of the population of the primary consumers, the rabbits, the mice, stuff like that. They limit them, so they don't get too many of them, and then they eat all the grass. So we need those secondary consumers to limit the population of the primary consumers, so you don't run out of grass to eat. Add trees and tertiary consumers to your island. What is a climax community? It is the quote unquote end stage of succession. So it's a community that will last a long time. So once you get big trees and tertiary consumers in there, there's nothing that's going to come after that. You know, you had lichen, then you had the mosses, then you had the grasses, then you had the bushes, then you have the trees. Well, there's nothing that's going to come after that. It's like the end stage of succession. It's like the end of it. So it's something that's going to stay there for a very, very long time with very little change. 13, what was the disturbance? So this is secondary succession. So remember, primary was brand new land. It's never been inhabited by anything before. Secondary succession is kind of the same thing. It's how organisms replace themselves over time. But this time, there was life living there, but they got disturbed by some sort of disaster. And on the computer, it was a forest fire. There were trees and a bunch of animals living there, and it got wiped out by a forest fire, just totally demolished the whole area. But there's still soil there. There's still soil. There's nothing living there anymore because it got wiped out by a fire, but there's soil. So this is going to happen. This is going to happen a lot quicker. What are some environmental disturbances that can lead to rebuilding by secondary succession? That could be fire, volcano eruption, maybe flood. Things that totally wipe out the area, but then it's got to rebuild. And that's what succession is, the process of rebuilding that ecosystem. 15, what were the pioneer species for secondary succession? Well, now we have soil, so we don't need lichen. Now the grasses. This is where the grasses will move in first. Because since there's soil, now you just have a couple seeds come in by the wind, and boom, you have grasses. 16, why does secondary succession occur quicker than primary succession? Because you do not have to produce new soil. Since there were already living things living there before it got wiped out by the forest fire, we got soil. Now we just need like little seeds to come floating in, and boom, they can just grow right away. You don't have to produce the soil like you do in primary succession. All right, so that's it. That's primary and secondary succession. So as long as you have a working Chromebook, working eyes, and some hands to type, everybody should turn this in. All right, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you next time.